and especially from this side of the room. Yes, no? Anybody have one last question? Sir?
It's almost yes, no. It's fairly close. It's relative to water. But fracking, that's not the relative to
The question is fracking, yes or no?
I don't, all of us regret living in a soundbite world, and I don't think this question lends itself to a soundbite answer. And so I'm not going to offer a soundbite answer. With your indulgence, I'll take 30 seconds or so to give you my general approach to fracking. The energy industry is one of the few industries in this country which is growing, which is employing people, and which is a ray of hope as we try to recover. In the year 2000, there was about $10 billion invested in developing new wells. In 2012, we'll be investing about $140 billion as a nation in that work. So my commitment is, if this technique is to be employed, it must only be employed when we're confident that it can be employed safely, and where there is full disclosure as to all of the chemicals that are used in connection with this process, and where the federal government and state governments have done all the due diligence they need to do to protect public health and safety. And the last thing I do want to say, and I said that my job has been easy. My job has been to support good things and oppose bad things. And I've said I've had the courage to be independent. And before you leave here tonight, I want you to remember that last year, I think Connecticut did one of the worst things ever for the environment. When we did a complete end run around the public trust and allowed a piece of land in Haddam, Connecticut to be sold out from under us. The governor was behind it, and with all due respect to my opponent, the agency her husband leads looked the other way. And I was one of 5 senators to vote against that. And I was also one of five senators to vote against another bill several years ago when another company wanted an end around CEPA, Connecticut's Environmental Policy Act. You remember that, Margaret? And so I do have the courage to stand up and do the right thing and to resist political pressures. And I make the commitment to you that in Washington, D.C., my record will be the same.
What does that have to do with fracking?
Well, fracking is something that I think is going to be a tremendously important issue over the next couple of years. It is going to be absolutely essential that we have in place protections for groundwater and for air and for safety of local communities. And local geological conditions matter enormously. The federal government, I believe, does have an important role in setting standards. I mean, one of the things right now you may not know is, EPA has exempted, the stormwater regs are exempted from fracking. That is wrong. That needs, clearly, if you understand what happens with fracking, that should stop. Surprisingly, Texas has taken somewhat of a leadership role by requiring disclosure of chemicals that are used. So again, this is where the gridlock in Washington is resulting in states having to step up. But the answer should not really be a state-by-state basis. We're having issues in places like Pennsylvania where there's serious concern about undue influence in the legislature. So again, we need to have safety, and that's safety for citizens who live in these areas. We need to have air and water regulations that are in place before we begin to figure out if this is actually, if this potential supply can be extracted in a way that is safe for those locally as well as safe for those more broadly. And one thing I think that's important to think about too, as we send someone to Washington, is being effective there. And that is going to be, taking a look at what the atmosphere is there. And we'll have a chance to go, as people are going home tonight, to listen and think about the national parties and to consider the objectives and the priorities that the national parties have placed on these issues. And they have, quite frankly, been very different. In the House of Representatives, I would argue over the last 2 years, under Republican leadership, has tried to strip EPA funding, has appointed subcommittee chairs who do not believe in climate change, and that adding votes to that caucus will continue a leadership agenda, which is quite at odds with what we have stood for here and the views expressed by my colleague Andrew here. Those agendas at the national level are badly out of step with our views. And so I would ask you to wrestle with what that means. I would like to see a national Republican Party more in line with Teddy Roosevelt, but it isn't where it is now. And that's the reality of where we are. And so I'd ask you to consider that. And thank you again, Curtis, thank you, Jean, and thank all of you for coming out tonight and being so patient.